He's probably thinking about other girls.
Is water wet? I mean, what does it mean to be wet? For something to be wet, it has to have a state where it's dry, right? So if something can be wet, it can also be dry. And water can't be dry because water is what makes things wet. So if you remove water, then you have no water. I mean, okay, let's look at it from another angle. If some people use is fire on fire as an argument that water isn't wet, because water is not on water. But the thing is, that is a false analogy, because what we call fire, the flame, is simply a byproduct of what actually is the fire. The fire is the hot part of the material that is being burned. And what do you need to have a fire? You need fuel, you need oxygen, and you need heat. So a fire can't burn another fire because it doesn't have the criteria of being a fuel or having oxygen. So fire can't be on fire because fire is just heat. Does that make sense? Yeah, so water can't be on water. Water can't be wet. If we use fire as an analogy. No, wait. Then fire on fire is not a false analogy. Because I proved that water is not wet using fire. But alright, but let's try thinking about this from the other side. Water is wet, and why would it be wet? Why is water wet? Because this is quite a thought experiment. I mean, I guess the only argument I can think of is that your clothes are wet because it has water, and an ocean is filled with water, so the ocean is wet. Yeah, that doesn't sound unreasonable, but we haven't gotten to whether water itself is wet. No, but you need a dry factor, right? Something has to be able to be dry for it to be wet. An ice cube is wet because when it melts it turns into water. And then, yeah, exactly. So water by itself is not wet. It's not the adjective wet, but it makes other things wet, like a solid cube of water, like an ice cube. Because an ice cube is dry. Unless it starts melting, then it becomes wet. Then it completely melts and becomes just water, and it's no longer wet again. So, I think I came to the conclusion that water indeed is not wet, because fire cannot be on fire, and so water cannot be submerged in water. What does the internet think about this? Let me check real quick. Is water wet? Wait, I need water is wet. I need some arguments for water being wet. Yeah, people agree with me. Water is only wet from the perspective of the surface it interacts with, but water itself is not wet. Well then. Well then, we've solved that mystery. Water is not wet. I'm gonna have to tell that to the boys tomorrow.